Greetings, I'm Dike Rostant. Welcome back to the TTT News. We are going in depth on culture and heritage with a person who has dedicated herself to its preservation, Maria Nunes. And in a time where time is so important, I want to thank you for making some time for us. Maria, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm fine, thanks, DK. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely our pleasure. And I want to say congrats, Anthony M. Saba Caribbean Awards for Excellence Laureate. How does that feel?
Oh boy, it's something that is such an honor. Um, and it's something, you just feel full of gratitude, really. It's just abounding gratitude, and for, to be among those who were also, honored this year, such extraordinary people. And to know that the work is recognized and will get more attention now, hopefully, that I think is what makes me feel, most deeply gratified inside. That really through awards like this, the work really gets further.
Okay, because it's one thing for you to say, okay, well, I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's another thing to say, okay, well, I believe that this work has a certain quality, but then to get that external validation. I mean, it's very important to have that intrinsic validation, but to see it coming from outside as well, I guess, like you said, is also something that can be very rewarding. But I want to ask, though, in terms of like saying the work is rewarded, why did you decide to dive into this type of work?
Well, I would say the work called out to me. I don't know how else to put it. I feel like it found me. Yes, I found it, but I feel like it really came looking for me. When I really started to document carnival culture in particular, it was so powerful, to witness people's art, the art of our carnival and all of the traditions of our carnival. And it really just, it spoke to me so strongly. I wanted to know the people who were making this art. It really grabbed the whole of me. I don't know how else to put it.
And it is amazing because we just saw some of those images and they say when a Trinbagonian telling the truth, they say my paws raised. But just those images that we would have just seen, my paws raised. And it seems as though if I take a camera, if I borrow your camera, I might snap a picture. But it seems as though the work that you're doing has this kind of depth to it. And that makes me ask you, looking for the depth in ourselves, what are some of the things that you see in terms of saying when some people say, okay, well, this is just surface, it's nice. But when I look at an image from you, it seems as though there's so much more than that.
You know, I guess that's each photographer has their gift, and I don't know. For me, I would say I feel like I really enter into what's I'm experiencing. I don't feel that I take photographs in a passive way. When I am, it's really immersion for me. I'm there, I'm completely there, I'm absorbed. In fact, sometimes I say I feel like I'm breathing with the person who is in front of me. I feel really connected. Everything else in the world stops for me, fades away during those moments when I have my camera. It's like I just dissolve, I would say, into what's happening in front of me.
And it seems as though, if I remember correctly, I think you described your camera as a bridge between the current day and a living history. If I'm correct with that, explain that a little more, thanks.
The thing, DK, for me with our carnival culture and just generally also our cultural heritage, what I started to realize was that this was literally embodied history. I don't know how else to put it, but that in the bodies of the person who dances a mass, for example, who dances Fancy Sailor, who is a Moko Jambi, um, that what's being somehow vehicled through this person and what they're doing is a living memory. It's a tradition passed on. It's like you can feel sometimes very strongly that generations of heritage is actually physically present in this person as they play their mass, as they live their mass. Because for people who are really serious into our carnival culture, it is something that is lived. It's not some kind of hobby. It's not something you just, feel to do at the last minute before Carnival Monday and Tuesday. It's actually your life. A person is a Moko Jambi. They are a Blue Devil. It's actually part of their identity and it shows in their work. And so that's why for me, I realize also that our history, when you start to research Carnival history, what you realize is that you're researching the history of Trinidad and Tobago, you're researching the history of the Caribbean. That so much of our history is actually in what we are seeing in Carnival and take for granted and maybe think it's just nothing.
And that actually reminds me of someone saying that they had entered a period of fasting and doing rituals, and you hear Bwaman, you hear Rope Jab talking about 40 days before the carnival, tell them and them to start the ritual. And so it's not as though someone says that you can have carnival. Like you're saying, this is a way of life. So regardless of what you say, these are the practices that I have at this time. These are the things that I have ritualized into my existence. And I'm going to live my life doing these things, regardless of whether or not I need to wear a mask, whether or not, and all these conversations swirl. But that brings me to the question of why such a focus, and I guess you started to answer, why such a focus on the traditional characters in Carnival?
Well, for me, it's the most powerful part of our carnival. Even let's just say visually, purely at an aesthetic level, what is portrayed in our traditional carnival is visually rich. There is design, there is intent, there is so for me, the traditional carnival is visually interesting, it's visually compelling. And it's no mistake, I think, that when we want to promote our carnival internationally, or even every year when they're launching carnival, who do they turn to but the traditional aspects of carnival? And I think it's because actually these are the forms that have most substance to them.
And this is the point where we take a short break. We return with so much more. We are speaking with Maria Nunes about documenting our cultural heritage. Stay with us. So we took a little trip to Greens and we are back. We're going in depth on how it is we document our cultural heritage. We're doing so with Maria Nunes. And Maria, one of the things that it seems as though you try to do is focus. No, you just spoke about the things that are visually stimulating, the things that people turn to first, but then sometimes it seems as though they are the first people to kind of get pushed to the side. And with that in mind, I want to ask, how do you define marginalized, and what makes you want to bring some from the margins a little more to the center?
I think we seem to have a very complex relationship with Trinidad, or our traditional carnival. It's I feel like it's a kind of a dysfunctional relationship that we have as a society, because on one hand, we like to hold it up and say, oh, this is our heritage. But on the other side of it, when it comes to the official part of Carnival, for example, traditional forms hardly have any room to breathe and maneuver. And they have been pushed to the margins by how large Carnival has become, how much of a really now Carnival is like really one big street fete, which is all well and good. But a small steel band going down the streets of Port of Spain, for example, playing its traditional mass. Often a steel band would have played like Sailor Mass or something like that. What happens is that the small steel band can't even compete with the volume of the big music truck. For example, a midnight robber cannot be heard on the streets of Port of Spain anymore because he is just boomed out by the sound of Carnival is loud, right? So the way in which Carnival has evolved has really effectively marginalized the more traditional forms, which are performance-based. I have been there in the Savannah when traditional portrayals have been hurried off the stage because they were quote unquote taking too long. And I think it's a tragedy when that is the perception, but yet a large band can be allowed to. I mean, now they put all sorts of limits. I know even large bands have time limits. But nonetheless, there is the sheer size of the large bands in Carnival and how Carnival is evolving means that small art forms in small numbers, it's very hard to get attention, to be paid respect. It's easy to be pushed aside, literally, because there is physically no space. I mean, I know now that there are some things being done to try and address that. But really and truly, I think that those traditional forms, for example, in the competition arena, very often there's no thought given to like needing to have scaffolding for Moko Jumbies to get up and use to be able to get ready. What does a Moko Jumbie need to be ready? The stage, what has to be done on the stage to make sure it's safe for a Moko Jumbie to cross, because it is a dangerous kind of art form to portray, right? And I think I've seen it with my own two eyes in the Savannah, how we don't really pay enough attention to what these traditional art forms need to flourish and thrive.
And with that evolution that you're speaking about, do you still see Carnival as a sacred space?
Oh yes. I mean, no matter what goes on in the official aspect of Carnival, the core of Carnival remains there. And I think we'll always enjoy that Carnival spirit that is what has given rise to what we have today, and which sometimes we forget. But the spirit, that cannot be erased. When Blue Devils traditional Jabolasi start to beat those biscuit tins, nobody has to tell you what that is. You feel it, right? When the original whipmaster comes out in the road and cracks his whip, and you have a band of jabs behind coming, nobody has to tell you what that is. You feel it. And I think that this is the thing about that spirit of Carnival in our Carnival traditions, that no matter what happens in the official side of Carnival, and the official side of Carnival can certainly at times frustrate and make it hard for traditional forms. I think no matter what, those traditional forms will endure because they're coming from a very, very deep and powerful place that will never die.
What are your thoughts on young people being inculcated into that spirit and accessing that sort of energy? And in terms of like piercing the surface of Carnival, and getting to that energy that is that brings that sacredness that you're speaking about.
Well, I think, to be fair, for example, in a lot of primary schools in Trinidad and Tobago, there are primary school teachers who do a lot to pass on some of that heritage, because there's still, children's quote unquote carnival still has a lot of, in fact, sometimes I think it's really the most beautiful part of carnival that's left in terms of on a larger scale. When you see the junior parade, to me, I feel very heartened, and you see young people really enjoying playing their mass and playing like in an actual costume. And it seems to me that one of the healthiest parts of our carnival is actually that junior parade. Now, because of course, of our current situation with COVID-19, I don't know, I haven't seen what's happening with that this year, but I imagine perhaps, so I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't know what's happening with it. But in terms of, in the normal scheme of things, I think that there seems to be some gap that happens because our junior carnival, I find in very many ways is very healthy. And you see really beautiful portrayals, and you see a great energy and spirit and love. So there is no shortage of interest in young people in carnival. It's just that when that transition takes place into the main, festival on Monday and Tuesday, there's a big gap there between what we see on Saturday with the children on the road and what happens on Monday and Tuesday. So I don't think there's any shortage of interest among young people actually in wanting to really play a mass.
And what about the need to document that? Because it's one thing to say, okay, well, people are embodying this history, people are embodying this spirit in terms of playing the mass or living the mass, but also documenting it so that we know that this is ours. This is someone that we can speak to. The way that someone can look at a photo that you would have taken of King David Matthew Brown of blessed mention, or other elders who have recently transitioned. I see Marissa Youngley is also painting and starting to fill that gap in the way with art, the way that you're doing with photography. What's the need for that?
Oh, well, I mean, it's vital, and it's vital not just for the traditional forms in carnival, but it's vital across the board in terms of our cultural heritage. That the need for that focus, that every year that we would have a record of ourselves, and because when I look at what's happening, I think people like myself who focus on those traditional forms, I could just use that as my own personal example, help to bring attention to something that is happening, but a lot of people aren't seeing. And what happens is because people mightn't see these things sufficiently in the mainstream media, they think it's not happening, but it's actually happening. And so to me, that's the value, a big, big value of documentation, is that keeping these forms that are not so, as popular or as large in numbers, but very real, keeping them in the public imagination and reminding people all the time, listen, this is part of who we are.
And I really want to thank you, Maria, for doing that work, helping us to be able to literally look at ourselves and see that we are beautiful. And all the best for this one. And this Maria Nunes, photographer, and so much more, looking at documenting our cultural heritage. On behalf of the entire TTT News team, I'm Dike Rostant. This has been In Depth. Thank you for joining us.